I worked all my life for Democrats, and I believed so much in some of the policies. And it's like in that instant, everything fell away. And not just the assault, but then since then, it's just been the reality of the fact that he's gotten away with it. There will be no justice. And so I'm trying to wrap my arms around that there will be no justice, and I have to move forward knowing that. But I can try to get justice for other people.
Tara Reade, welcome back to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you for being back on. You were actually my last guest before I went on a 10-month hiatus, so it's been almost a full year since we last spoke. I'm glad to have you back on the show. And I'm just wondering, since it's been a year since we spoke, how have things been? I know that last time we spoke, you were kind of getting smeared and slandered by the media. Has that changed at all, or just what has the experience of the past year been like?
Yeah, when you spoke to me, I was in a hotel room. I had had death threats, didn't have a place to live, and there were possible criminal charges being brought on me for felony perjury. So yeah, it was a tough time. How those felony perjury charges came about is I was an expert in domestic violence for criminal cases, and when the media started going after me, a group of people in Monterey County, Democrats, got together with attorneys saying, I'm going over my testimony and seeing if I lied anywhere. And so they claimed that I lied about my education, which I did not, and that I was, of course, cleared of all that. Ryan Grimm did a deep dive into it, as he does. He's a very good investigative reporter. So you can see that if you want online. But so you caught me in the midst of that. So I'm in a much better place now. And I've written a book called Left Out, When the Truth Doesn't Fit In. And, I'm getting my life slowly building back together.
That's great. I'm glad to hear that. It's awesome. Yeah. I do want to talk about your book a bit, but I do have to just start off by asking, because the big feature in the news this past week was Joe Biden meeting with Vladimir Putin. What was that coverage like for you watching that happen? And especially the way that the media covered it, because I personally found it very frustrating the way that they focused so heavily, almost propagandistically, on Russia as committing human rights abuses and whatnot. Leave out the fact that the United States has done that to journalists and whistleblowers like Julian Assange and Edward Snowden, and the fact that we interfere in elections and everything on that side of it. But the fact that you personally were assaulted by Joe Biden, how did you take the coverage over the past week of that summit?
It felt pretty dystopian to me, and for all the reasons you just laid out very well, including I would throw in Yemen and the border. And right now, kids are still in cages as we speak under Joe Biden's administration. I would have to say the Western lens was pretty much how we saw that summit worldwide. What I was really impressed with, and I always get flack for siding with Russia, but it's not so much siding with Russia as I just think there's been so much propaganda against them, and we've been basically waging economic war against them for decades. And I don't like the bias, as you know. And what I did note is that, as far as statesmen, President Putin carried it better. He had to be grilled for 90 minutes by an NBC reporter that basically was all into the gotcha, right? And he held his ground and did very well, and English is a second language. So that was really something. You didn't see Joe Biden do a long form interview in English or anything else. And then at the conference, I don't know if you saw it on social media, but Russian media said that they were not allowed to go to Joe Biden's press op afterwards. So I just don't understand how we can tout ourselves as freedom of speech and democracy and all of this when we're actually the exact opposite. So we're just throwing out these mirages of equality and freedom.
And I think you're an example of that. I mean, you're somebody who came forward with a story of being assaulted by a prominent politician who was on the road to becoming the president of the United States, and you were attacked relentlessly by the corporate media, and again, in a uniform manner that was similar to how we would say a totalitarian regime's state media would attack somebody and slander them. So again, I can't imagine what that's like personally. And I don't know if maybe you can also speak to just the fact that Joe Biden is president now, this man who assaulted you. What does it feel like emotionally now that the fact that the man who assaulted you is, essentially the most powerful person on earth?
It's painful. It makes my blood boil. It makes me angry, sad, rageful, all of those things put together. I try to channel that anger and rage into constructive things like writing creatively, helping other people, helping other survivors, because, my story is unique, but yet it's not. I mean, you have Juanita Broaddrick, you have the Trump accusers, you have, people that have dealt with other powerful people, like in the Weinstein case. So although I feel alone, I do have some support system around me of other survivors that quietly in the background give me that help and, emotional support. But I have to say, I have bad weeks. I have bad days, where I just don't want to hear his filthy name one more time, because it's just constantly a barrage. And I don't know if you can imagine what that would be like, but just, and then also the obsequiousness of everyone, of Democrats, the sycophants, that just the way they just bow down to him and bend a knee. I don't understand it. I mean, he was never really that popular of a politician. And he certainly wasn't the leader in the Democratic lineup for president. And in fact, as you pointed out, when I was coming forward, there was a point when he was going to drop out in January because he just was so unpopular. So yeah, it's a mixture of all those things. And I think what you have to do is you have to keep your sanity by, tuning it out. I go into nature, I go see my horse, I go fishing, I hang out with friends and do a lot of creative writing, and that really helps. RT has been really wonderful. I've been doing some op-eds for them. They don't exploit my story at all. They're very respectful, and I really appreciate that, because one thing that has happened was the exploitative quality that happens of the stories of sexual assault survivors when it's someone powerful, like what happened to Rose McGowan. The New York Times, the way they used her to get a Pulitzer, and then now they trash her, and they've always trashed me. So it's just, but yet they use us for clickbait and they make money off of us, and it's infuriating.
One question I did have is in regards to your appearances on RT, because I know that folks have gone after you about that, again, smearing you as a Russian agent. I've also heard criticism of you for going on conservative media outlets. I remember in particular somebody in my Twitter feed just saying, she's gone on OAN, she's gone on OAN, how can you take this person seriously? I know that the liberal establishment corporate media has smeared you, and that's not really an avenue, but have you ever considered, because of that backlash that you faced, not going on those outlets, not appearing on RT or conservative media?
Absolutely not. It's not even been a consideration. I'll go on the platform that gives me a voice, because sexual assault and sexual harassment is nonpartisan. And the fact that we're demonizing certain media outlets is ridiculous. I don't know why RT is treated the way it is. It shouldn't have to register as a foreign agent. That is ridiculous. And hopefully someday that will be remedied where they don't have to do that. I think, again, it just feeds into that kind of neo-McCarthyism hysteria that feeds the military industrial complex, right? They want all that money for those weapons. Well, they need an enemy. And I think they're too afraid to really admit that China is the one that, they're worried about. So they kind of put everything on Russia. And it's just, it's gotten old. And I think people are seeing past it and seeing through it. And I have no problems with standing, but beside my decisions of just going wherever I need to go to be heard. Chanel Rion at OAN reached out to me. She was very, very kind and very authentic with me. She's also been smeared. I mean, they did petty things to like make her life miserable at the White House press briefings. And I don't agree with her politically, but she has been so respectful. And I know she doesn't think of some of my lefty views, agree with those, but yet she's been, she did a really good investigative report. She was meticulous, and I admire that. And that's all I ask. I just ask for a neutral platform. And I even talked about Trump and his accusers, and I was critical of the Republican Party as well. And both outlets that you mentioned have let me have that voice. Well, you don't see me on any of the corporate media, so.
Well, one of the people who has really come out strongly against you is Edward Isaac Dovere. He dedicated a whole chapter in his new book to you, Battle for the Soul. And he also has been pretty relentless going after you on Twitter for the past year. What has been really the most offensive or most disgusting thing that he's said about you over the past year?
He didn't say it, but it was in a thread and he liked it. But someone called me a Russian whore that made all my money off my back. And these were all DNC, trolls and whatever. And they would talk about things they would do to me and who I was, and just, horrible things, use swear words and slut, whore, you name it, fucking liar, whatever. And he participated in that. He and Richard Painter was another one. And that started actually 2 years ago in 2019. My story, when I came forward, was printed originally in the Union, which was a local paper in Grass Valley, California. And I, at that point, had come forward with part of the history, right, with the other seven women, I was the eighth. And that story had not even released in the paper yet. It was just online, I guess, for 2 hours. Richard Painter and Edward Isaac Dovere were already smearing me. So when I spoke with Lisa Lair from the New York Times, the reporter that worked on my story, she said, well, Edward Isaac Dovere works for the Atlantic. He says you're a Russian asset. And I said, that's ridiculous. I said, where does that come from? But it was just a switch and bait, right? And it's like what they did to Tulsi Gabbard. It's like what they did to any single person that disagrees with them or uses the catchphrase, get us out of these endless wars. That's a catchphrase to get you in trouble. Who knew that you become a radical or a dissident by just preaching peace, by preaching cooperation with other nations? And who knew by coming forward about sexual assault and sexual harassment that you would become that makes you a dissident? So yeah, there was that time that happened. And that day that he did all that activity of calling me a Russian asset, that night I got my first death threat. And it was from some random probably but they said, hey, we know your address. We're coming to your house. We're going to kill you. And I had to report it to federal law enforcement. It continued. It got really bad as the year progressed. So he was, kind of get back behind the scenes in that. And then, he wrote this book. So if you want me to, I will go into, the two major lies in that book.
Yeah, what were they?
Well, the first one was this conspiracy theory. He didn't mention the Russian thing so much. He just kind of printed my affinity to Putin, all right? And some of that was out of context. It was from a novel, which I think I told you about, The Last Snow Tiger, which will be coming out soon. He referenced the tiger pictures, which was weird. Those were paintings done by my mother. So I don't know. I didn't really understand the context of what he was trying to say, but he was basically just implying that affinity that I had for Russian leadership. Then he goes on in the book to say that the fact that I was, my whole history with Joe Biden was actually more of a Bernie conspiracy. And that's what he alleges, that somehow David Sirota had perpetrated this. And I've never met him. And I just want to like shout from the rooftops, I'm not a conspiracy theory, not Russian, not Republican, and not a Bernie one. And so it's ironic when he kept saying my story changed, because it was always the same. I just withheld details. His story has changed. He's gone from calling me a Russian asset to a Republican Trump kind of, that thing, to then this Bernie conspiracy theory. And that's why, they had to fight so hard. And, that this was all being pushed by David Sirota. Well, I know for a fact it wasn't, because I reached out to the Bernie campaign along with other politicians before I went forward publicly. No one responded to me.
I saw a interview recently also where Dovere, he was going through some of these allegations. And one of them that I thought was really ridiculous was he was disputing the fact that your mother had called into the Larry King show, saying that they couldn't prove that this was your mother. And just the hosts of the show at the time, they kind of were pointing out what a ridiculous accusation that was.
On the Larry King call, I think I don't think there's any question whether or not that was her mother. She kind of flagged that this call.
We don't know for sure that it was her mother.
I mean, she says it's her mother's voice. Her son says it's her mother's voice. It's from the town where her mother lived. I think that what it doesn't show is that she doesn't talk about a sexual assault in the call. All she says is that my daughter worked for a senator and she had some problems that she complained about. She does not. So it doesn't go all the way and corroborate everything that she had claimed, but.
Go all the way and corroborate what she claims, and it also we're taking what may be her mother. We don't know, but we're taking what could also be a coincidence. It could be some other senator who was having problems with the daughter of one of Larry King's listeners, and the only way that we are saying that it's her mother is because of those coincidences and because it's Tara Reade who said it. But again, Tara Reade has a history of saying things related to this accusation and related to other things that aren't true.
Right, so it's not the only thing. It's not the only thing we're taking. We're also
California. She was calling from California in the exact time period.
Right, we're not idiots. Like, it's 1993. She claims, look, my mother called the Larry King show, and she generally said this. She was living in San Luis Obispo at this time.
We don't have anything to say it.
Right. Okay. So then another mother living in San Luis Obispo at the exact same time. Like, can you imagine the infinitesimal chance that could possibly be a coincidence, and then look at it from Tara Reade's perspective and say, my God, even this is being called into question? Like, at least acknowledge that all the facts line up, that this was my mother.
No, I think that what you see is that there is a lot to suggest that it is her, but we do not know definitively. And I think when you look at Tara Reade's story that has changed multiple times about what happened with that incident, and when you look at other things that have happened in her life, we have to take seriously that she can't be seen as a verified source on things that she's claiming related to this.
Just what are your thoughts on the claim that he's skeptical of that?
Yeah, I was really grateful regarding that story being found, but that my mom called in. That tape from Larry King was actually found by a grad student. CNN kind of archived it and hid it in a way, and then when reporters would try to get it, they wanted several $100s to release it, etc. But yeah, that was ridiculous. Ryan Grimm was actually hosting. I think he was subbing in on Rising. I saw that recently and watched that, and Ryan Grimm pointed out a couple things, but I think what he missed, probably because he didn't know, he had not known that other reporters too, had called. Larry King was still alive when this came out, right? This is right before he died. And he verified that even if you're an anonymous caller, you have to give your name. So somebody took her name. So that was verified that way. Plus, I know my mother's voice, and sadly, she died. Yeah.
Are there any recordings of your mother that you could use to verify that was her voice?
Probably, yeah. I have videotapes and stuff. Yeah, I could probably do that. That's a good idea. I could actually do that. She was so nervous in it. I remember that too. And I just remember her voice very distinctly, and that hearing it again was so nice because she died of throat cancer. So it's the first time I got to hear her voice in some years, and that was nice. to hear. But Dovere, yeah, that was my mother. It was verified by several reporters, and it was in the small town of San Luis Obispo, California, so the odds were even less. And Ryan Grimm did point that out to Dovere. But I think he was just desperate, just looking for anything that would validate my story or lend me credibility. He wanted to pull the platform out.
And something else that Ryan Grimm disputed with him a little bit about was, it seemed as though Dovere was making the accusation that Ryan Grimm had done something unseemly to work on your story, and there was an exchange there where Dovere was saying, I chose my words very carefully for a reason.
You also imply in the book, I think you say an Intercept reporter, referring to me, was given an exclusive. What do you mean by given an exclusive? It seems like you were trying to suggest, without saying it, that the Bernie Sanders campaign had given that exclusive. Was that just a kind of a sloppy use of the passive phrase there, or were you trying to suggest that the Sanders campaign had given me an exclusive on this story?
Well, if I had meant to suggest that the Sanders campaign had given you an exclusive on it, then that's what I would have written. The words that are there are what I wrote.
So who were you saying gave me an exclusive then on the...
And the words that are there were chosen carefully, and they're gone through several rounds of editing and vetting, and we're going to stand by the way that it's there.
Okay, but it doesn't really say anything. So it just says that I was given an exclusive, but doesn't say by whom or for what reason.
You're asking me to add words to what is obviously a very sensitive situation there, and I am in a position where I have written very clearly about what I could, and where there are words that needed to be left out to avoid getting into questions of sourcing and questions of legal issues, then that's the way that it is.
And I just wonder, based on what he's said about you and the accusations that he's made about you and the way that he's targeted you online, have you ever considered any legal action against him specifically, or just against anyone in the media who's really just treated you disrespectfully and libelously over the last year?
Politico, that headline that is always at the top of Google, saying I'm a manipulative lying user. That was the headline of the article. They used two randoms, one random person and a landlord, to say I was a terrible person, that, and basically trash me. It was awful. As far as Dovere goes, he was careful the way he couched his language, I think legally, but obviously calling me a Russian asset and some of the things that are online, yes. I mean, I'm looking at it. The other thing I looked at that was pretty major was the New York Times first article printed my social security number, as you know. I think I told you that, which is still having huge ramifications in my life, by the way. Yeah. So
have they ever apologized about that, or
no,
provide any kind of credit protection or anything?
My attorney sent them a letter, and they basically replied saying, well, she didn't seem that upset about it at the time. She was calm. And I'm like, how my emotional state was when I spoke with you, I was being rational and calm. That doesn't mean I wasn't very, very upset. It just, I don't know, it was odd. That was the response. So no, they haven't done anything to, they just admitted that it was a mistake, but they said it was accidental. So, but it did its damage. Like Dovere. I mean, Dovere's constant attack. And what's interesting to me is his connection to Biden, which I want looked at, because I know he did Oppo for Democrats, Oppo research, opposition research. But he was the first person to ask Joe Biden a softball question, remember? I think there's a video, and then he sort of got attacked on Twitter for how ridiculously softball that question was. So I'm wondering, that's just, that connection is just so tight. I obviously Dovere to me represents Biden's pit bull.
And I know we spoke about that too in regards to Time's Up and the connections that are there between the Biden administration and them, and why they didn't want to help you out. So I mean, that's another part of this that doesn't really get acknowledged that much. The fact that there is a lot of connections there. There's people who don't want to lose access to politicians and whatnot, so they just repeat these talking points.
Regarding the connections of Time's Up, I mean, it was pretty blatant. Anita Dunn owns the PR firm, was the founder of Time's Up. Joe Biden's campaign paid her $2.2 million over the campaign, according to FEC records, to basically silence and to booster his image, right? Which that's what she does now. She's senior White House advisor, and I don't know if she's still hanging out in that role or not, but definitely she did her job, right? So yeah, there's all of that going on with the smears and the connection to Time's Up, and as you know, I move forward. I think Ryan Grimm did a really great detailed reporting of the Time's Up, and so did Law and Crime. And if you look up those articles, those are really good reference points.
Well, I guess I'm just wondering, given the fact that people have gone after you over the past year and said these terrible things about you and made these threats about you, and again, the fact that Joe Biden is now the president of the United States, do you still fear for your safety sometimes?
Yes, sometimes I do. And I don't like admitting it, because I'm trying not to stay in a place of fear. I'm trying to push past it. I'm not in the same place I was a year ago when you met me in the summer. I've really grown in a way and moved forward with healing and focused on taking care of myself through this process, and gotten a lot wiser about who I let into my sphere. I'm not so trusting, which is healthier. And, you know, I just don't think staying in fear is a good thing to do. But I have my moments. For instance, the Department of Justice, you know, did sealed search warrants on all my social media and opened a case in Northern California. My attorneys called. We still don't know what that case is. It happened in December, but Twitter got 5 subpoenas. Their attorney called me and informed me that it was done under seal, and they had to go into court and motion to tell me that they had to release all my information to Department of Justice. So there's this weird fear, if you want to talk about fear, of someone going to be knocking on my door, like law enforcement, like what happened to Ryan Wentz, who said something on Twitter about AOC and ended up with Highway Patrol at his door.
Right.
You know, I mean, it just feels like our country is getting really hysterical. And it's operating from a place of fear and then weaponizing it against its own citizens. And so that's kind of the meta of that. And so I'm trying to just not have those thoughts. I just move on with my life. I stood my truth, told what happened. There is evidence, you know, of the sexual harassment claim somewhere archived in the University of Delaware that he won't release, that Biden won't release. So, you know, there's enough threads there that if there was a proper investigation, which there's never been, I think, you know, he would have to answer to some of this.
Have you ever considered any kind of GoFundMe to fund an investigation into what happened and try to get those kinds of records?
Actually, I had a lawyer try to get them. I tried to get them, and FOIA doesn't apply to those records. That's why very shrewdly they put them in the university. So I don't think it's just my record. They're hiding a lot of things in those archives, and they're not allowed to come out until after he's gone. So I know that another, and I forget the name of the organization, sued to have it opened, and we're not successful thus far. So, you know, I have not pursued a GoFundMe in that regard.
I guess I'm also wondering too, just again, because the entire experience that you've been through, from what happened to you with Joe Biden to what's happened over the past year with just being relentlessly attacked on corporate media and online, how have you dealt with that personally? How have you kind of you know, found peace and solace? Have you? I hope you don't mind me asking, have you gone to any kind of therapy or anything, or are there just certain techniques that you employ to kind of deal with all of that?
Well, I believe that therapy is good for to help with trauma, right? As long as it's trauma-informed therapy. Unfortunately, I did seek out a therapist, but they were concerned because it was Joe Biden.
You serious?
Yeah, they were. They said they didn't have the legal apparatus to deal with anything if there was a lawsuit or something, and they just didn't have it. So
that's insane.
So I get that with lawyers. I get that with therapists. I get that a lot. I get that when I apply for jobs. People don't. I'm still persona non grata. So it's been, that part is challenging to move in the world, I guess. So what I do for peace and solace is, for me, it's nature, meditation. I really love to swim. I do that a lot now. Now the gyms are back open, thank goodness. And I spend a lot of time with horses, my horse. And I had studied some equine therapy, and I want to continue that. And I just, love my family, my daughter, and spend time with her. She's an adult. She's 26 years old, and she's a lot of fun. And we just went to Crater Lake National Park, as a matter of fact, recently, and just kind of had a good time. So I try to look forward. What's really helped me, it was writing those op-eds for RT. That outlet, having a voice where no one's giving me a voice, but having it in my own voice and not being censored, that's been really cathartic.
Because you wrote this book as well, what was that experience like? Your new book, Left Out When the Truth Doesn't Fit In. What was the experience of writing that book like? What was that cathartic? Was that painful? Was it a little bit of both?
It was both, especially when I had to write the part about the assault itself, because, I've told the story with Megyn Kelly, with Katie Halper, but very few times have I gone from beginning to end of the incident. And then, of course, with the police, when I made the police report, I did. But having to write it down in my own words, just that was a different experience. And it was really good. And it was also interesting because I had to find the right words to try to capture how devastating that moment was. And the reason it was so devastating is because this wasn't a stranger. This is somebody I trusted, someone I admired. And I'm sorry, I'm getting emotional now, but I worked all my life for Democrats, and I believed so much in some of the policies. And it's like in that instant, everything fell away. And not just the assault, but then since then, it's just been the reality of the fact that he's gotten away with it. There will be no justice. And so I'm trying to wrap my arms around that there will be no justice, and I have to move forward knowing that. But I can try to get justice for other people. And I think that that's hard. And the betrayals, finding out that some of the people I knew betrayed me in really personal ways. And so those are things that are just going to take a while to heal. And so, yeah, so you can see how emotional I get. I have a ways to go, but I'm on the path to heal.
Well, I do have to tell you, I think there are many, many people out there who are thankful for you coming forward and who are inspired by your story of speaking truth to power, especially in the climate that we're in currently. And I also think that most people do believe you, even on the Democratic side. I think that if you have seen Joe Biden over the years, if you've seen how he's treated women, inappropriately touching them, he's done the same thing with children. He's been demeaning towards lots of people, but also women. We also saw that during the that trip to Geneva, the way that he spoke to a female reporter and shouted down at them. So I think that people do know the truth about Joe Biden. I think it's just the fact that people, they put morality aside, they put their politics in front of morality and are choosing to support a man who has sexually assaulted you.
I know it's it's hard for me. I think there are times when I don't want to be here in America anymore. I'm so angry at some of my fellow citizens that know the truth and voted for him anyway. And I just want to scream at them, how can you vote for my rapist, basically? And I know that that's something like last year you met me kind of when I was in the midst of all the chaos and the, now this year you're meeting me in the rawness of knowing that my path, he's president and this is the reality. And now I have to live in it. And so definitely I have fantasies about going to like New Zealand, Fiji, Patagonia, wherever, where you can't hear anything about, well, I suppose you would in New Zealand, but, places where you wouldn't have to listen to the empire, the Western media.
One person who did come forward and support you and who wrote the foreword to your book is Rose McGowan. Could you just speak to what the experience was like in her getting into contact with you and supporting you and what that support has meant to you?
Oh, she saved me in so many ways. She still does. We talk every few days, and usually briefly, sometimes it's just quick messages or pictures, but we stay in close contact. She's invited me to where she's at. She's so gracious. The first thing she said to me when she spoke to me was, Tara, I believe you. And that meant the world. And the professional and personal hits that she's had to take because she stood by me is, been very amazing. I mean, the New York Times went from holding her up as this hero because of the Weinstein to just now first they were just kind of, smearing her. Now they ignore her. And so when she was trying to get her album out, Planet 9, which is this healing music that has like theta beats. It's a beautiful album. It was completely suppressed. And, for me, I have this gratitude, but I also have this guilt around some of the professionals that have been impacted. Ryan Grimm, for his investigative reporting, took hits professionally for reporting my story. Katie Halper for airing it. Megyn Kelly. And Rose. And yeah, but that's the tactic, right? We talked about that at the beginning of our talk here about the playbook. There's the playbook, and they use it on the world leaders they don't like. They use it on citizens that they don't like. And the playbook that the Democratic establishment uses, weaponizing the corporate media, is to smear, attack, ignore, and then go again. And, it's been effective, but I just try to know that the people that have stood by me, like Rose, have their reasons, and, they'll take care of themselves as well. So, and she's doing very well. She's a powerhouse and really developed a vernacular around kind of what's been going on with this election cycle. She really called out both parties and called them cults and said America is like being in a cult. And she kind of coined that. And it's a very apt description.
So who else besides Rose have you really appreciated the support of? I know you mentioned Katie Halper and Ryan Grimm. Who are just some other folks who you really have appreciated the support of over the past year and a half?
Well, a lot. The Anthony Zinkas is a trauma professor who has been very outspoken and has just been trolled relentlessly. And they even tried to get him fired from Columbia University for him supporting me. And he still stood by and still stands by me. Anthony, Lou Godbold is a Weinstein survivor. She's very publicly supportive of me. Louisette Glass, Sarah Ann Massey. There's so many. And then Avalon Claire is somebody who lives in the Midwest and with her boyfriend, husband, and she does a lot of the graphic arts. Like she did the TaraReadeTruth.com, and that's where you can find like timelines and a lot of information about me. And what's amazing about what she did is she got together a group of people to help me deal with the social media trolling. And so there's this group of people, Eric and Natalia, and they're from different political backgrounds. Some are socialists, some are, whatever, progressives, anti-imperialists. But this diverse group of people that just keep reaching out to me and kind of protecting me. And some people don't want to be public about it, but they're behind the scenes and they're doing what they can. So that's good. And of course, the publisher that took me on, TV guest spurt, I'm really grateful to them, because Jackie Jordan took that project on when nobody would touch me. So that was huge. Yeah.
And again, just I know probably the most difficult part of your book was talking about the assault that you experienced. What are some other parts of your story that were difficult to discuss in your book?
When I first discussed the reporting, Beth Reinhard from the Washington Post was brutal to me. She was one of my first interviews, about the sexual assault. And she came out like on the phone. This is Beth Reinhard from the Washington Post. Is this Tara Reade? And then she said, and I remember her voice just really kind of almost yelling at me. And she said, are you the one that made the claim of sexual assault, that Joe Biden sexually assaulted you? Don't you realize this is going to hurt his campaign? And I was like, don't you realize it's going to hurt his campaign? Is that a question? And I said, is that a question? And then she launched into this thing and then demanded to hear my story. And back then I was so green to the media, I thought, well, I have to respond. But I could have hung up. I wish I would have. Instead, I told her the story, and then she started to imply, ask me questions about, which was really painful. And at the time, I had maybe told the story publicly once, I think on Katie Halper. And I hadn't told it that many times. It's something I've suppressed, and it's like I don't want to think about it. So anyway, she's asking me, did his hand move upwards? Did he touch your clitoris? And just really graphic questions, and implying that somehow I got pleasure from it. In other words, it was really disgusting. And I was like, is this a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist? Is this how they talk? I mean, I had no point of reference at this point. And it was and so I ended up huddled in the bathroom crying after that interview. And so that part was hard. I think, other parts of my book, besides the assault, that were hard to write about was my family, because I've had complex trauma in my life. My father was not, he was not a warm person. In fact, he became a defense contractor. And I really had very little contact with him after the age of 13. I saw him only a handful of times before he died, and he came right before he died to apologize to me. But he was pretty brutal, and I write about some of those things in the book. So that was hard, and it was hard to write about my brother Michael, whom I very much miss, who died. And that happened right before I went to work in DC. So yeah, those were poignant moments. And then I try to end the book with, different ways to approach healing and different organizations that can help.
Conversely, what were some parts of the book that you really enjoyed writing about that made you smile, or maybe where you may have learned about yourself a little bit?
My Europe trip. I mean, I was such a mess. I mean, in a good way. I was a hot mess. But just I had so much fun, and I was so open and to new experiences, and that was fun writing about that. I left out a lot, I had fun writing about my daughter, and my younger brother Colin, who's a comedian. And so those parts were fun. But yeah, and then I had fun actually writing the Russia chapter, because I had been so villainized, and I felt like such a good feeling to be able to write that chapter and say, okay, this is how it is, instead of being, all the myths that are out there.
So you are working on another book?
Yeah, when I talked to you last year, I kind of canned for a while the last Snow Tiger, which was a novel where I flipped the script. Basically, it's a Russian-American friendship between these two young girls, and then some tragedy happens and some things go on. But it's not a spy kind of novel thing. It's a flip the narrative, where in this book, actually the Russians are the good guys. If you know, not that there's that many bad guys, but it's more about a human connection and the complexity of that, and family. And I drew a lot from my own life. And also there's like food and music and things that connect us, our cultures, rather than divide us. And so I was really looking forward to writing that book and finishing it. And I've kind of had to rework it because of everything that's gone on. So I'm hopefully going to have it out in the fall.
Could you speak to maybe some ways that you felt compelled to change it just based on the persecution that you've experienced?
Well, I wrote about the assault in the book in the novel form. When I thought I wasn't going to come forward, I needed an outlet, right, to talk about what happened to me, to put it in a place. And so I had written about it in the novel. I had integrated it in there. So I had to rewrite that. I had to take that out and kind of rework it and figure it out. And I might find a way to put it in there. So the book has characters that I've known in real life, and then it has some that are fiction, but it interweaves. And so yeah, there's some things I changed just to, protect my own, I don't know, because I just didn't want to be attacked again, about that. So.
Do you have any ideas for any other books that you'd like to write in the future, or are you really just focusing on that one for now?
Yeah, it's funny you said that. I've been working on some poetry, so I'll probably release a poetry book. I have only about 20 some poems right now, but I want to put together about 40 to 50 and then kind of have an editor go through them. But I'm gonna, so I'd like to do that. And then Boudica is this person, this warrior, Celtic warrior queen who lived historically during a time when the Roman Empire was, going. And Boudica was quite a figure, and there's never been like a major book about her. And I'd love to write something about Boudica and her life. And in my book, I kind of talk about when I felt weak or really like weepy, and just not that you're weak if you're weepy, but you know what I mean? Like your energy or your light is drawn away from you, right? Boudica is this fierce warrior. She was raped by Romans and then whipped publicly, she and her daughters, and she went after the Roman Empire with her army, with her Celtic army, and then I think some hordes from the north. They gathered together, and she almost burned London down. That was when they called it London town back then. But she was quite the warrior. For like 3 years, she just waged a war against the Roman Empire and like drove their line back. And so I thought, yeah, I like that. I like that.
That sounds like a wonderful story. I would think you should write that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I have to wonder too, just because I know that you've been interested in politics for a good part of your life. That's why you were a Senate aide to begin with. Have you considered, after this persecution that you suffered and just the way that the media has relentlessly demonized you, have you thought at all about maybe getting involved in politics someday?
I don't know. I don't know where I would fit in politically, because I'm kind of a Tulsi Gabbard in some ways, and a Bernie Sanders, and I don't know who else. I don't want to say AOC because I'm really disappointed in her. But I'm very anti-imperialist, as you know, and I don't, if there's a mechanism to get into politics without having to have a corporate overlord, I would love to do that, but I don't know if there is right now. So it's something that's, used to dance around in my head. Now I don't know if that's a reality. I really just like writing. I'll probably stick with that and creative work.
Well, I don't know if you have some more time. I do let my patrons submit questions to my guests, and there was one patron question. It's about something a little topical, so I'm not sure if necessarily you can or want to comment on it, but I do have a patron question for you if you want.
Okay, sure.
John McCarthy in Chicago wanted to know, Do you have any comments on the Anna Kasparian accusations against Jimmy Dore and her own story regarding degrading behavior towards other women? So I guess I would just preface that. Are you kind of familiar with the whole controversy surrounding TYT over the last couple weeks?
I've been kind of tuning it out. As far as I know that there was a false reporting about Aaron Mate, that he was accused of some different things about Syria, and I thought his reporting in Syria was very good. So I kind of just didn't, and I don't watch TYT, so I don't watch that. It's kind of, I don't know, it's pretty mainstream dumb. But I've only.
Well, I can try to fill you in just briefly.
Yeah.
This started because Cenk Uygur put out a tweet where he was making an equivalence between Israelis and Palestinians, essentially saying that they're fighting because they're both religious. Aaron Mate responded to that with a tweet saying, "My God tells me this is the worst tweet ever." And after,
I remember that. Yes, that was a powerful tweet. Yeah.
So after that, on TYT, Cenk and Anna Kasparian just kind of went nuts, ranting and raving about Aaron Mate.
They said Aaron Mate yelled at me. And so
Aaron Mate lied. Aaron Mate. everyone cares what Aaron Mate has to say, right?
Okay.
The guy who denies that Syrian children were killed with chemical attacks. Yeah.
And
fuck
gets
Aaron
paid
Mate.
by the.
Yeah, fuck you.
Anyway,
let's move on.
Russians.
Let's end the freaking pod. I can't.
Okay, see, that's what happens.
I can't stand that guy, and I can't stand the very intentional disinformation they put out there in regard to disgusting dictators around the world. The very people they seem to be working for, to be quite honest with you. Let's move on.
All right, we're done.
Disgusting. Absolutely disgusting.
This started this whole back and forth between them and Jimmy Dore. And at one point, Cenk put out this tweet where he was asking Jimmy Dore, Aaron Mate, Glenn Greenwald, and Max Blumenthal to speak out against Putin. And it started this whole back and forth there. After that, there's some videos. I actually uncovered some videos and some old tweets of Cenk saying the opposite prior to when, I don't know if you know this too, but TYT received a $20 million investment in 2017.
Now, we have wonderful news for the company. We actually did get an investment that was announced yesterday. It's $20 million, which to us is a lot of money.
And since that time, a lot of their opinions have changed. So prior to about 2018, Cenk was saying the opposite about Syria, where he tweeted out an article where a former Bush administration official had suggested that it might be an Israeli false flag. He put out other tweets where he was skeptical. He actually publicly went out in favor of Jimmy Dore when the corporate media was going after Jimmy Dore for being a conspiracy theorist, for saying that the gas attacks may not have happened.
What they're referring to about the Syrian chemical attacks, Rand Paul went on television, said almost the same exact thing Jimmy did, which is don't just trust the Pentagon. Let's verify to see if that attack actually came from the sources that the Pentagon says that it came from. That's what any responsible citizen should do. By the way, that's what a journalist should do. But CNN, on the other hand, goes, the Pentagon said it, so it must be true. I took down the note from the spokesman from the Pentagon. That's why CNN needs to partner with people like PolitiFact to check facts for them, because they're not real journalists. If you were a real journalist, you would actually have your own organization to check facts, and you would have checked the fact about Jimmy Dore, which you didn't. Instead, you did false equivalency. It's another reason why this article is absolutely trash.
So right around the time of the investment, Cenk seems to have changed his opinions on many of those things, and now is going after those people. So this was really a big controversy, kind of going back and forth. And then in the middle of this, in like a span of a week or two, Anna Kasparian also came out to say that Jimmy Dore sexually harassed her. And Jimmy went over this story on his show, saying that he commented on a skirt that she was wearing. And Cenk and Anna put out a video where they really went after Jimmy Dore. They called him a pervert, so that he was looking up her dress.
I want to be clear about something. So the DM that I sent him specifically called him out on his constant sexual harassment of me at this place, at TYT. I also want to be clear that I didn't talk about it with anyone. I never talked about it with Cenk until very recently, because for obvious reasons. And so I sent him that DM because the harassment has continued. It's not sexual harassment, it's been constant harassment online that wouldn't go away. Doesn't matter if I ignore him, which some of my friends, my leftist friends have told me, just ignore him, it'll go away, just ignore him, ignore him. Kept going and going and going, directing trolls at me nonstop. And finally I couldn't take it anymore. So I sent him that message saying, you remember what you did to me.
Yeah.
And I can't stand that he positions himself as this moral fighter for progressive values when he and I both know the kind of behavior he engaged in when he was working here. So the reason why he wrote the apology card was because every time he had made inappropriate comments about me at work, I ignored it, but as I was walking into the studio, because my students were supposed to watch the show, it was their final assignment, watch the show, and there was a written assignment related to the show. And as I was walking in with them, that was when he made the comment, and he didn't make a comment about a news skirt. He made a comment about how sexy my legs were in front of my students. And it was degrading, obviously, and I want my students to respect me and take me seriously. Seeing an older man that I work with talk about my body like that in front of my students was wrong. And so for the first time, I actually snapped at him and told him to never make a comment like that about me again. And so I think he realized, oh, I think I might have gone, I think now she might actually make a big deal about this, and that's why he wrote me that apology card to basically try to calm things down. But I mean, comments continued after that. That's who he was. Everything that Jimmy does on a daily basis, his entire intention is to be indecent and to be incredibly cruel to others, regardless of how much he agrees with them, regardless of how little disagreement he has politically speaking with these individuals. It's literally his bread and butter. This is how he makes his money. But I want to be clear about who we are and the kind of audience we want to foster, because this isn't just about building an audience, it's about building a movement and working with people, because we work with our audience all the time in pressure campaigns in regard to Congress and ensuring that we get a vote on a $15 an hour minimum wage. We want fighters beside us, and we want people who have the right ethics and morals to do this with us, right? If you watch that and you think there wasn't a big deal, I think that was totally fine. If there are any remnants of Jimmy Dore's fans within our membership, within our audience, and you see this and you think oh, I'm disappointed in you, Anna, I want to let you know, I don't want you in our audience. You are not part of what we're trying to do. Okay, so spare me the tweets about how disappointed you are and how you're canceling membership. I do not care. I don't care. I encourage it because I don't want that toxicity. I don't want that culture as part of anything we do at TYT, whether it's internal in the office or external with our audience, period. That's it.
After this was put out, a lot of people started digging up old TYT videos of them in the early days where they would air videos of, they would air upskirt photos of celebrities.
Eva Longoria flashed her panties.
Oh, okay. This is Young Turk style story. I like this. When the story has no purpose other than, come on, let's show you Eva Longoria's panties.
No, but her panties are very surprising because, hold on, before we show the picture.
Have you obtained it?
I've obtained photos of her panties.
Cenk put a naked picture of Britney Spears on his website and was instructing people to go see it.
And how does she decide is a good way to make up for that, Anna?
She flashes more coochie.
This is from last night. More cooch. This is unbelievable. I mean, look, she's just flat out flashing us. I mean, she's become Uncle Creepy Tom, who's, like purposely goes out with his bathrobe on and goes, oh, yeah, sorry about that, with the bathrobe open. Like, she obviously did this on purpose. By the way, you saw the blocked out pictures there because we can't put up naked pictures on YouTube. So we're putting up the actual pictures, the uncensored versions, on theyoungturks.com. So you see a link to it, and you can check it out there on theyoungturks.com.
They had games where they would do guess the camel toe or guess the cleavage.
So we have obtained a photo of a celebrity's camel toe. It is a close-up, so I'm off the kids if they've never seen a gine. Let's go to the picture.
Gine.
Let's do a little close-up. Who's camel toe?
Oh, for the love of God.
Take a while to guess.
They put up pictures of Vanessa Hudgens that was essentially revenge porn. Just many other things. Shank seemed to be in favor of bestiality at one point.
No.
But here comes the controversial part, the part I shouldn't say. I believe that if I were the benevolent dictator of the world, I would legalize bestiality where you are giving, you are pleasuring the animal. You see what I'm saying? Okay. Okay. Now why? Why did that happen? It's the dumbest thing I've said.
It really is the dumbest thing you've said.
No, I'll tell you why. Because there's was the case that we covered where there was like a guy or a girl or something that was pleasuring a horse, and the horse came to a conclusion, right? So who got harmed?
You know that people who are, okay, look, not to be a downer about what you're saying, because what you're saying sounds kind of funny, but a lot of people who are being raped can actually, have an orgasm. So, if a guy is being raped, he can have an orgasm. You can't say, if you come, that means you wanted it. That's not the right way to go.
But number one, you're being an unbelievable downer.
I am, but that's the truth.
Number two, they're not both humans. Number three, I mean, if you really asked the horse, did you mind? The answer's got to be, no. Do you see what I'm saying? No.
So just a lot of really strange sexual stuff. Also, just looking back, TYT had a lot of sexual content for a large period of time, so it seemed very odd that the way that they were going after Jimmy, saying, if you support this man who sexually harasses women and laughs about it, then you're not part of our movement, when in fact it seems as though TYT was really built on doing that. So again, I can't really expect you to comment if you weren't kind of following that thread.
Yeah, now that I have this kind of encapsulated, I have seen some of the old TYT stuff. That's why I don't watch them years ago, because I was around during that time. Yeah, it was kind of gross. They're just kind of silly and gross and whatever, and misogynistic even. And as far as he's asking, your person is asking that wrote in specifically what I think about sexual harassment. First of all, it's a nuanced issue. It's where many things are true at once, right? It's when I came forward about sexual harassment, I was talking about specific events that happened when I was working, unwanted touching, being asked to serve drinks. My boss was using his power to manipulate me. So that was my story. I don't judge other people's stories because I'm not an investigator. So I don't want to make a comment on saying that she's lying or not. However, I would say that they both shows engage in comedy to some extent, and comedy's tricky. And right now we're supposed to be in this woke era, right? To use that vernacular. And frankly, we're kind of going over the top. I think in certain ways we need to find a balance. And I think all of us collectively are trying to find a balance of where that is, where we can have a little bit of humor and laugh at ourselves as human beings, and just just the way we interact and the way we fuck up, basically. And to me, I'm looking at this more in a meta way, so I hope I don't get too esoteric when I say this, but to me it feels like the establishment Democrats' dream to have the left divided, or the perceived left divided and going at each other about these issues that don't matter. Aaron Mate is a fabulous reporter, and so I think I find it so offensive that some of Glenn Greenwald are being attacked for being Putin, supporters like me, when we are trying to, Max Blumenthal included, those are great reporters, and they do investigative. They're award-winning. They do investigative depth reporting. I don't really see that from TYT. They're more of a kind of a entertainment show in a way, entertainment news, but it's not investigative. I mean, like Katie Halper has a great podcast, but it's not investigative journalist. She brings on investigative journalists, but she's not one. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that I'm not going to trash Anna Kasparian and say she's lying, but it makes me wonder when you start weaponizing if you're engaging in the same behavior. So if she's talking about camel toe, and then in the same kind of time period, and then this is happening, yeah, that's bizarre. But that said, I don't judge women's stories. I'm not an investigator. I'd have to hear it from her and hear the whole thing, and really not so out of context. I'm a fan of Jimmy Dores in that I think he brings a lot of humor to issues that are hard to look at, and he's still able to find humor in it, like Ron Flaconi, some of the others that are fun to watch, and they bring these issues up. But again, he's not an investigative journalist, right?
Right.
It's really shocking to me the amount of this accusation of people being paid by Russians and that kind of thing. That's just ridiculous. I don't know. So to answer your viewer's question, I didn't answer it. Sorry, I don't know. I have enough information.
Again, it's hard kind of getting it secondhand. But I guess I would ask, so you were on TYT, right? You told your story to them?
No.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I thought you gave an interview with them.
No, I never did. They were dancing around it, and then they never followed through. And I've always thought, in fact, I was kind of prepping myself that it was going to be, one of those, because they seem pretty establishment dumb. But as soon as Bernie dropped out, and it was clear that Biden was going to be the nominee, they did not have me on. They didn't touch me. In fact, much of the left media has not touched me since, because
Did TYT ever reach out to you just to discuss the possibility of having you on?
Yes, and then it just went away. So, because I responded and said, sure. They never followed up. So it's okay. Yeah, whatever. Probably for the best. So, considering, because I don't like that they went after Aaron, because I do know one thing about this. See, I think I left early, and then everything has happened since. But the point that I left is when they basically showed a false video about Aaron Mate's reporting, because he went to Syria, and it was really good reporting. So that's where I left the scene, sort of, as far as knowledge.
Yeah, again, their reaction to all of this has just seemed somewhat frantic, and they had a Syrian journalist that was a guy in Brooklyn who has not really wrote that much about Syria. They had him on to try to debunk what Aaron Mate had done, actually going to Syria and doing the reporting. Again, that's part of what TYT seems to be attacking Aaron and others for, is actually going to Syria and doing journalism, which is kind of odd. So, but yeah, again,
and you don't see them having Richard Medhurst on, who actually knows what's going on. If you have any questions, or your viewers do, about Syria and that whole thing, watch some of his broadcasts, because they're very educational for Westerners. I will say
absolutely.
that.
He was actually my last guest.
Yeah,
that's the thing too. I just wonder if Cenk specifically, if he's a good faith actor who hasn't been corrupted by the $20 million that he's received, why doesn't he do an interview specifically on Syria, on Russiagate, on the investment that he received? Why doesn't he do an interview with a neutral anti-imperialist party? Maybe not me, maybe not Richard Medhurst, maybe not somebody who's spoken out specifically, but maybe somebody like Lee Camp or Abby Martin, or just somebody who's consistently anti-imperialist, who might have questions about why have you seemingly become an imperialist outlet after receiving $20 million. It's a little suspicious.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I noticed their narrative changed quite a bit. as far as, from what I understand. And that's why they're kind of not on my radar, because I'm impatient with hearing the same messaging in corporate media. And then if I hear it in a podcast again, I'm like, I don't need to listen to it. It'd be like me listening to Pod Save America. I'm not going to listen to that crap. It's just canned. It's like, they're just like being mouthpieces for the Democratic National Committee.
So who do you recommend as good media outlets?
Well, yours actually. And I look at RT is one of my favorites. When I have to look at mainstream, I'll look at BBC World News just to see kind of their take on things. But the Gray Zone, I think, is one of them I was looking at. Katie Halper, there's another lefty, Caitlin Johnstone. She's amazing and very consistent. I love her work. Glenn Greenwald, I'm a member, I subscribe to his Substack as well as some of the others, as well as Aramonte, as a matter of fact. So I read a lot of their stuff. And Richard Medhurst is a big one for me, especially when it's complex foreign issues with the Middle East. And for those Americans that don't know geography really well, he'll always have his map up, which really helps. And I'm always like, go, Richard, because the Western, it's like, how we see Syria, like we don't even know where it is on the map half the time, we're so isolated in some ways. So those are some of them. So what about you? What are yours?
Yeah, I would say all of those outlets. I think especially the Gray Zone has done great work, and also Glenn Greenwald. I think Matt Taibbi is a great journalist. Actually, when I had Noam Chomsky on the show, I asked him a similar question. He said specifically Glenn Greenwald and Matt Taibbi were his two favorite journalists out there. I think obviously WikiLeaks has done great work, and that's why Julian Assange is sitting in Belmarsh prison right now. And again, I think that just goes back to what we were talking at the top of the show, the fact that we really don't have free press in the West, from the fact that Julian Assange gets put in prison and Edward Snowden has to hide in Russia for his freedom, and the fact that Silicon Valley working with wings of NATO are working to suppress independent media. So we don't have a free press in the West, and that's unfortunate. But are
you nervous about what's been coming out the last couple of days about how Joe Biden announced, I think it was yesterday or the day before, that the primary focus for Homeland Security is going to be domestic terrorism? I mean, I thought, because I'm already like on Facebook, my name is suppressed. When I tried to do a book reading thing on there to get advertisers or whatever, I was banned from it. They said I was interfering with future legislation. I was interfering with the election. My name, Tara Reade, was interference with the election. So it was suppressed. Now I'm interfering with future legislation.
That's pretty insane. So you, as a human being, are interfering with an election
because I came forward about Joe Biden. Isn't that wild? I mean, I just feel like we're in an upside down world, but maybe not. Maybe this is how it's always been, and I'm getting a taste of, it's personally just affecting me. But this is how it's been for, Julian Assange, as a matter of fact. I can't wrap my head around the fact that they appealed, the American government appealed, and thinks that we have jurisdiction to bring him over here. I don't understand. He's Australian. Right. So, but
right, and I believe that he would be put in prison because they keep bringing up Alexei Navalny, this right-wing nationalist in Russia who the West is trying to prop up. He's facing prison, I think, for a couple of years, whereas Julian Assange is facing life in prison for exposing U.S. war crimes. So it's
brutal life in prison, like the kind where he can't see his children and he can't see his partner, and he's in solitary and getting visits once every 48 hours. I mean, I think it's inhumane, and really it's so wrong. But it's like what's happening to Steve Donninger, if you've followed that story, the human rights attorney, who dragged Chevron out and won his case, and 2 years he's been Yeah, on his. Yeah, they've got him imprisoned for. So what was your thoughts on that when you saw that? How is that going to affect like podcasts like yours and other, journalists?
Well, it is funny too because I just rebranded from Primo Nutmeg to Primo Radical, and then the story breaks. You must report all of your radical friends and family members and coworkers. So I thought that was funny timing, but yeah, I mean, it is dystopian, and again, it's what we think of. How the people in the West are kind of told that Stalinist, how we're told the Stalinist Soviet Union was, where people had to report on their family members and whatnot. That's what we're doing here, but there's this really odd sort of double think that seems to be just in establishment, corporate media, in the Democratic Party and the Republican Party as well, where the things that the U.S. does are somehow completely different than if another country did it. And again, I remember just when I was younger, kind of thinking, how do people in North Korea not know when they're seeing this propaganda? How do they not know how patently ridiculous it is? But you could say the same thing about Americans, and I think a lot of people do, though. I think a lot of people don't take it seriously, don't buy into it. It's really just these segments of privileged, highly indoctrinated folks who kind of are going along with the establishment's program.
Right, because they benefit from it directly, and the rest of us don't. So, but I think too, I was reading a survivor of North Korea who came forward, who was talking about how from her perspective, what they're doing in Columbia University, was attending there. She didn't like it. She felt like there's an indoctrination happening. She was talking about the establishment Democrat, kind of some of the lines, some of the cancel culture stuff, and from her perspective, it was threatening in the sense of ideologically trying to tell her how to think. She was feeling forced, right? And she's hypersensitive to that because of the way she had to live and survive. So I think what they do is, if you're so busy just trying to get by, to get food, to get shelter, to whatever, those higher consciousness thoughts about political, ramifications, you lose that, right? So you just rely and get fed whatever is on the radio or on the television, and you just absorb that. And it's almost like this thing where our citizens think, well, mom and dad will take care of it, right? Like they don't. So we just have to start learning that we have to take agency in our own life, or look what can happen. I don't know if you saw, but I shared a tweet that they were talking about the next pandemic, that the CIA should be more involved than the health organizations. And I'm like, that's a really bad idea. I don't know if people agree with me, but I think that's a really bad idea. I mean, we don't want to be in a surveillance state. And Edward Snowden was so brave and gave his freedom to tell us that message of what our government was doing. Julian Assange, the same thing, exposing war crimes. And history will know them as heroes, but right now we're in it. And again, people just don't want to think about it. They just want to try to survive.
It's true. And it is unfortunate, but I think there are many people out there who see through it. I think the average people who aren't plugged into the propaganda networks, and again, viewership, it's worth mentioning, viewership in establishment legacy media is going down. Viewership in TYT is going down. I don't think people really want to hear the same old imperialist talking points. I think that they know it's fake. I think that they know it's a charade. I think that a lot has done to protect their narrative. That's why Joe Biden is really kept away from the public, kept away from any kind of critical media. That's why he didn't answer a single question to a Russian journalist, because they know it's a house of cards and they're doing everything they can to kind of keep this facade going, keep this narrative going.
And look at the difference. Like Vladimir Putin, right, answered 7 questions from all different outlets, including American outlets. Joe Biden, he had a list, and he even looked up and said, well, they gave me a list of people to call on. So they don't even hide it. And they're like pre-canned questions. And so the one question he got that was like, as he's leaving, that was unscripted, and he loses it. because it's like, how dare you actually ask me a real question that challenges anything?
Right.
So it was interesting. And ironically, it comes from CNN, who's just like the biggest propaganda machine ever. But,
well, I also wonder too, I imagine these journalists must really hate themselves, right? Because you go into journalism to expose the truth because you're interested in getting stories out there. And again, it's all about truth, right? Finding what the truth is and communicating that to the people. And then going from that to just becoming this establishment mouthpiece where you're just saying whatever the CIA wants you to say, that's got to breed a lot of internalized contempt in these folks, I would imagine.
Or at least cognitive dissonance, because they're seeing one thing and knowing, like through their reporting, they're digging up things, but they're being told this thing that's not true, but they're having to report this thing that's not true. I think a prime example of that is PBS. My personal experience with them, with Lisa Desjardins. She and I communicated recently, and in the fall, and I said, you interviewed everyone that you could find from Biden's office except for the person who witnessed sexual harassment. She didn't interview her. She didn't interview some of the interns, and she didn't interview me. And I said, would you interview me and look at this video? And I showed her a video of the office from that time. And she wrote back, she met with, her upper whatever management and said, your story's been litigated and investigated. And I said, but you never interviewed me. So that says it all. And I still have the email. And one of these days I'm going to print it on social media. I will. When the timing's right, I'll find the right moment. Because it's just bullshit. I mean, like, how can you tell a story from everyone else's perspective except the person it happened to? And of course, they never interviewed Joe Biden either. So,
was there anything in that video that you came across that you thought was particularly interesting, or maybe just, I don't know, brought back any memories, or just, is there anything in the video that you think was especially important?
Well, I think there was a couple things. One, what I was wearing, because remember they were going on and on that I was dressed like whatever, and I was dressed in like a normal little suit dress in it. So you see that, you see my camaraderie with some of the people in the office. You see how snarky the person that spoke out negatively about me, he was in the video, and you saw him being snarky on the video to me. So that was kind of interesting. Ben, whatever his name was. And then Dennis Toner, who said who didn't know me, he's on the video talking to me. So I don't know. It's just those little things. It's like a little time capsule, though. For me, yeah, it brought back a rush of memories. And I sounded so happy during that time. I was so thrilled to be there and thinking this was the right place to be. But, my eyes opened pretty quickly, even beyond what I went through. I was challenging them about certain things, because one of the first things I noticed was they wanted me to hire, because I hired interns. That was my job, was to screen the interns and bring them on board. And they wanted me to hire only DuPont employees' children. And these weren't like DuPont, like board of directors DuPont children, like those children, really wealthy, mostly young white males. And I pushed back and said, we need more diversity. And I had a meeting with Ted Kaufman, and he was annoyed with me. And he said, finally he gave in, and he said, well, 50%. But yeah, I would get a pack of, they would tell me I was in charge of this, but then they would give me a files, and it would say VIPs, and that was who I was to hire.
Here I am in the Senate office. Hi, Ben. Hi. Say hi, Ben.
Hi, Ben.
Turn around. Let's get that profile. Okay. And here's the view from my window. It is a room with a view. How do you get it to? There we go. There's the Capitol. And here's my desk. There's my computer. And there's my posters. Here's Elise and Kim joining me from the Ochoa campaign, and they're back.
And your phone's ringing. So
and my phone's ringing. These are pictures of Senator Biden. Where should I do that? Oh, there's the Ireland poster I got there. Okay. Here's a good picture of Senator Biden. the senator. And 52nd inaugural. And that's my mailbox. Right there, it's full of stuff I have to look at. This is Melissa Justin, one of the new interns here. New interns, new turns. And here's a Delaware poster. And here, are you singing, Kim? Okay. This is. Here's Ben doing some computer work.
What are you doing?
I just got this video camera in the mail. This is Mary. She helps me with robos and.
That's Tara. She annoys us.
Hey, I'm cutting that out of the film.
You're gonna make policy statements.
Yeah, you should make policy statements about what you just saw. Oh, here we go. Yeah, action. This is Tara. Hi. Yes, if you don't mind, I was going to email you, but I can just tell you. Could I keep it until tomorrow? They didn't deliver me a truck until 5 o'clock. Oh, I mean, you know what I'm talking about. I'm trying to return all those binders from the attic, so I needed that truck. You can't find Michael? He's right here. He just walked in. Do you want to talk to him? Yeah, 446. Okay. 446. And what is he picking up? Okay, you got it. Bye.
What is it?
Please go to 446. Let me film you guys all together. Yeah.
Somebody said watch out for Tara because she's got a video.
Oh, Matthew?
Oh, I think it was Matthew. Yes, that's just a little one.
Yeah, it's a handycam. And that's Senator Biden's family. So, here, Dennis, I want to get you. Here, look up. Hit you. Oh.
That's going to be used against you.
Jen. Jen.
That's cool. You know, it's been a long day. I feel greasy. I really hate it.
Jen is one of the legislative assistants making decisions about our nation's future. Hard at work tonight.
That's a damn camera? I'm going to put it sick.
Oh, you're so pretty. And Justin, working late. What a good intern. Oh, let's look at Jim Green.
That's a gift from X.
Yeah. So, all right.
You got me one.
Look up one.
This is my overstay.
Very busy.
Okay. And here we have debate, debate, debate. This is my apartment. There's Cleo. Cleo! Say hi. Hi, Cleo. Say hi.
Again, Tara, I personally really appreciate you coming forward and telling your story. I think it's important. I think, again, a lot of people do believe you, whether they say so or not, but you've just exhibited remarkable courage. So thank you again for doing that, and thank you for being on the show today. And I really do hope that you continue writing. I think that those sound like some wonderful books that I want to read. And for folks out there who want to pick up your current book and who want to follow you and stay in touch with you, how can they do that?
All right. So on Twitter, it's at Reade Alexandra. And for the book, you can go to the Evil Empire of Amazon, or you can go to my website, Tara Reade, READE, author.com, and order it there. And yeah, and you can find me, like I said, on Telegram is kind of a new secure way. I have a Telegram channel, Tara Reade Author. And I kind of encourage people to let's start looking for other platforms, right? Like, are you using Rufkin yet? Rufkin?
I actually am not. I agree with you. I need to. I tried some other channels before. I tried Minds. It seems like that didn't really take off. I think some people were using Mastodon for a while, but yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with you, because it's not going to be too long before we're all deplatformed.
Yeah, there you go. So we'll meet each other on Telegram and Rothman, and we'll look for each other. We'll find each other again. Okay. But thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. And, I always enjoy our conversations. So
absolutely. Thank you very much. And hopefully I can have you back at some point in the future.
Absolutely. Take care.